Ready.
Hello, beautiful beings. Welcome to the Eternal Compass podcast with Jenna and Heather. We're here today for what feels like a really powerful conversation. For this is something that Jenna and I have personally been moving through in our own individual journeys. But the topic of conversation today is truly at the heart of what the Eternal Compass podcast was born from. And so we invite you today into the conversation of the voice, our throat chakra, our frequency of sound that we emit when we open our mouths and speak. And so if you found yourself here, may you ground into your heart space, ground into the present moment with us, because Jenna and I are here for it, and we hope you are too. And I know, Jenna, you recently had a really powerful visual come to you during a circle. And so I would love it if you shared with us what that was about. I know this conversation is going to span kind of a wide breadth of what the voice is and how important it's been for us to heal it, reclaim it, recall it, step into it. And I think it spans from a little bit of part of the conversation we had last week where we talked about creative expression. And I know for me, that's a big part of what my journey's been, is stepping into this version of myself and fully expressing that version with every version that comes, every iteration. So I'm curious here how you can share what that vision was and what it meant to you and what it's speaking to you.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. This was a few weekends ago. I was invited into a lovely space. The space was all around honoring and healing shame. And to be honest with you, initially I went just to support the facilitator. She had come to my circle, new to this area. I recently moved through a lot of guilt and shame. So I was like, well, I'd be happy to go and whatever comes up will come up. And as it usually happens with visions, they come in and they're very surprising. So this vision was very surprising for me to see it and see it in a way that I saw it and experienced. So the first part of this ceremony, she called them altars, and we had different altars, essentially meditations, where we were invited to go within the body and connect to something. There was some kind of prompt. And the first one was, where does shame live in the body? So she guided us to do a body scan to kind of feel into where we can feel that shame is held. And moving from the feet all the way to the head, I could feel a little bit of shame. There were fear and shame together in my belly, which I wasn't surprised at because I've done quite a bit of work in that area, which is actually, expression and free will in the belly. But what I really surprised me is when it came to my throat. And so moved up from the chest, from the heart to the throat. And right away, when we got to the throat, I saw a noose around. And then seeing that and feeling that, then the image shifted a little bit, the vision, where it was like it panned out a bit, if that makes sense, where it wasn't then me, it wasn't first person. It was like panned out to the scene in front of me. And the scene in front of me was standing, I would say, what felt like three feet in front of maybe 3 to 5 women. And at first, all I could see were these 3 to 5 women, and they were hanging. So they looked like ragdolls. And I really couldn't see the noose around their neck, but I knew that they were hanging from a rope, and that the rope was cutting off their life support. supply and their ability to speak and their ability to express. It didn't feel really literal. It didn't feel like I was seeing, I was at some witch trial and seeing the women, and the women were, I didn't feel like that. And I couldn't see the women's faces. I could just see their bodies, like limp bodies. And then that image panned out more. So it was like sometimes when I get visions, it's like I can pan in and I pan out, almost like you can do in a camera. And that happens to me in dream time too. Kind of hard to explain, but if you've experienced it, you may know what I'm talking about. So then it was like panned out more, and the image shifted to thousands of women in the same position hanging. And right as I'm like witnessing this and feeling I'm one of these women because I have a noose around my neck as well. I heard, "You must speak the unspeakable." That was the words that came right after the vision. It felt like I was given a gift and a responsibility to speak the unspeakable, meaning speak what hasn't felt safe generationally, ancestrally, and even in the feminine collective. That so many women that came before me felt like they couldn't ever speak, and they lived with a noose around their neck, and they died with things that felt like it needed to be said, it needed to be expressed. And since then, I've realized that being able to speak the unspeakable you can take it in so many ways. That might just be speaking a feeling that other people won't understand, and so you harbor it within you, or you speak about an experience that feels too scary, or so you harbor it in front of you, or the unspeakable could be a deep belief that you have, but you feel like people will misunderstand you, so you carry it and you hold it within you. And when we hold it and we don't let that move through us from, body all the way up through our throat, it really like cuts off our life force in a way, and our ability to fully express and be creative beings. And so that was the vision, and the invitation since then has been to speak the unspeakables. And going back to the vision, actually, the last part was when you do that, when you speak the unspeakable, I could then see that every time you speak something that's hard, you get to cut and free a woman. So not only are you freeing an aspect of yourself, you're freeing an aspect of your feminine lineage that couldn't do that. And you can release her. And that there's so many women that are with us physically and in the unseen that will feel that sense of power and that release when you speak the unspeakable.
Wow. Yes. I love when spirit speaks to us like that. How are you? So since then, you said the invitation has been to speak the unspeakable. So can you share like a time here where you've done that?
Yeah, I had an experience actually just the other day. It was Sunday, just a few days ago. When we have family gatherings at my house, my other family members, my mother-in-law, they are religious, and when we gather for meals, they'll typically want to pray and won't even ask like consent. It was just like, we're going to pray, and we're going to pray in a way that we've been taught, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, thank you, Lord. Very Christian. My mother's very Christian, and my mother-in-law is Catholic. And, this has been happening for the last, few years. And it didn't bother me at first. And it slowly started to bother me a bit. The first time I really noticed that it bothered me it was on Mother's Day. And here we are praying to the Father and the Son on Mother's Day. I'm like, where's the Holy Mother? Where's the feminine? Where's the honoring of that? So I did speak up, but I kind of spoke up in like using humor almost in a way. It wasn't like I wasn't very clear about this is important to me. And so eat right. So when it came to gathering on Sunday, it was my daughter's 10th birthday. And I've got my plate of food and I'm one of the last to come to the table. And I can feel everybody's just sitting there, like waiting to eat their food. You know, that feeling of like, okay. So I sit down, and instead of waiting for one of them to initiate the prayer, because I will pray over my food and with my food, but it sounds very different from how my larger family will pray. And so I invited my daughter. I said, "Oh, it's your birthday. Would you like to bless our food and say something?" And I could tell she got a little uncomfortable and said, "Sure, but she's never really done that. I've never given her that invitation." And so I said, "Okay, well, we'll do it together." And so with my daughter and I, we kind of held the space, and using my voice, I guided her and invited the people at the table to, like tap into our heart space. And essentially, the prayer was just the honoring of life, the sacrifice of life, of what's in our plate. Everything that's on our plate was once living, and the humans and the plants and the elementals, everything that came together in order for us to have this experience to then nourish our life force energy, and did it with my daughter. And that doesn't sound like a big deal, but it really was, because utilizing my voice and stepping in almost with my voice and ensuring like this is, because I could feel inside, this is my house. And if anyone's going to create this space and bless the food, I really would like for me to do it. It doesn't mean I need to do it every time. It was almost an important invitation for me to do it. Again, like speak the unspeakable. And shortly after I did it, it's funny because sometimes what happens, and maybe you experience this too, when we do say the hard things, then some voices come in within us that feel really uncomfortable about it based on our conditioning. So shortly after I did it, I could feel myself start to kind of flush. And then I thought, oh my gosh, did I upset them? Did that feel disrespectful to them? And I don't regret what was said, but I just observed and honored some of those feelings too, because some of those feelings were part of programming from childhood, but I think even beyond childhood, of don't say it because you're going to hurt someone else. Don't say it because they won't understand. Don't say it because they're going to think it's rude, right? So yeah, that's just kind of one example of a small but very large moment of speaking the unspeakable. Because how could we pray if we don't pray to the Father and the Son? What would that even sound like?
Thank you for sharing that, because I feel like there's so many ways where we can receive that invitation and step into it. And somebody outside of it, yeah, somebody listening to this might be like, well, that's not a big deal. But for you, your soul, your expression, it was a big deal. And so anything that feels like a big deal to us, it's important for us to honor that. And it doesn't matter what anybody else outside thinks or feels, because it's our soul moving through this evolution, right? And I can really relate to the vision and what you're talking about. I feel like for me and my family, it's shown up as the label or the diagnosis of this Hashimoto's hypothyroidism, which is the thyroid's in your throat. And it's something that my whole family has.
Wow.
I put that in quotes because what I've seen within my own healing journey, it's not something we have. We label something, if we attach ourselves to it, then we really limit ourselves. And I started to really have issues with my thyroid like 12 years ago. And there's a ton of health stuff that went into it and a whole journey, but it was really like 8 years ago that I started essentially my healing journey with it. I started looking at my diet. That is really what I think began my journey for me, but a couple years after that, when I had my son, was really when I started to get more into, and the invitation came for looking at Eastern stuff like chakras and energy work. And when I started to look at the throat chakra, and when I started to see the, I guess, correlation with the energy and how I've been suppressing myself and I've been keeping my emotions and my needs and my wants and everything. Literally, I put the noose on myself. I started to speak up, and of course people didn't like it because, I had been quiet for so long.
Yeah.
But as I started to do that, and I stopped believing that I had hypothyroidism. I stopped believing that, and I started to believe that I could change and shift my life, but I had to speak up. I had to fucking step up. And that was really hard because it was family. It was my husband. It was in every aspect of my life, friendships. But as I did that, and I did a lot of conscious work, like in my throat chakra and energy work and stuff. I mean, I guess that started in like 20, it was about a year after I started doing all of that where my belief shifted, where I stopped needing the thyroid meds that I'd been on for like the 4 or 5 years before. And I haven't needed these thyroid meds in like almost 6 years.
It's amazing.
And I fully believe that I healed that, but it was not because I healed Hashimoto's hypothyroidism. It was because I started stepping into my voice, and saying the hard things that felt hard to me because I hadn't ever expressed it before. And I can see how that has, well, how the suppression, I mean, that lives in the women in my family right now and in the form of thyroid issues. And it's been really fascinating to witness, but it's almost, I wonder if you can relate to this, where as I've stepped into my voice more, I don't know if it's made other people in my life uncomfortable. They don't like what I'm mirroring, but they've almost started to play the small. And it's not because I'm asking them to, but it's because I feel like I'm stepping up then into myself and asking my needs, asking for what I would love. When we do that, it's an invitation for others to do the same and to meet us there. And maybe it's just then where they're like resisting that or not able to, not meant to. I don't know. Have you seen that within yourself or within like your relationships or the opposite maybe?
Yeah, I would say I've seen more of the opposite where the other person takes it as a being aggressive,
Oh, well,
where
that's what I'm saying. Like they don't
oh,
like it. And so, but it's because they want to continue to play small. Or do they lash out? Is that what you mean? Like,
yeah,
there you go.
like they take it as me being aggressive, so then they bring aggressive energy into it.
Okay.
So that is fascinating. I guess that plays into this, if a woman speaks up, there's such a fine line for how to do it correctly,
Mhm.
in quotation marks, because of an outspoken woman is a bitch. So that's an aggressive woman. I have to say, I've been surprised how people, more so, I guess, in my marriage, and I think I've shared this on the podcast before. I have found when I'm super grounded and clear about what I want to say and what needs to come through, I actually find that my husband understands it. There's an easier translation because it's not distorted by fear or by a need or by a really big emotion. When there's those distortions, it gets lost in translation. And then sometimes he takes it as me being aggressive or me trying to start an argument. If I speak something with neutrality that's really grounded into my truth, I've been pleasantly surprised that he tends to be able to understand it a lot easier. So something about, almost like a radio station. If the radio station is really clear and there's not a bunch of fuzziness and static, others can feel that frequency. It's a certain frequency. And others, it's easier for them to then feel it. And other people need that as well. That it's an invitation for them to then feel into their truth and be able to either just witness the other person speaking it or being able to maybe potentially say something as well.
Yes. That's such a great analogy, the radio piece, because I do feel like, and I think that plays into that vision and that meditation with the shame, like the lower vibrational emotions when they are trapped in our body, whether it's a space like the throat or like the actual vocal cords, or the chakra, or muscles. I mean, anything, it distorts the movement, it distorts the frequency, the energy, the vibration that is made. And when we speak with fear or those bigger emotions, we're not speaking from like the true pure self. And it makes it harder for people to receive the truth, because then it like, it's almost like then it pings off of like their distortions, and then it just feeds that, right? But
Right.
if you're speaking from like the clear point within yourself, then there isn't any way for it to be distorted, or for it to be received and perceived any other way than just truth. But
It's
that takes a lot of practice, and it
oh,
takes a lot
yes.
of clearing all of this out, and learning what that is within yourself.
And trusting it. I think it's
Yeah.
oftentimes when we get a feeling, when we get some kind of intuitive knowing, we question it and we silence it. And all of that adds these kind of distortions onto it. And so, and we can easily peel that away. We can peel that away to say, I believe this. This is my truth. This is how I feel, period. It isn't a question mark. Oftentimes, if we're saying something, it's like, we want others to be like, oh yeah, I get you. I believe, like they need to validate our truth. No, 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 no. We don't need that. So if we're not looking for other people to validate our truth, it's a period. It's not a question mark. And another example I got as you were speaking is almost like the sound. So much of energy is also equated to sound, right? And so we can use sound as an example. The radio station was one example, but almost like you're on a piano and your truth is a C, like ding, ding. It's a clear sound. And how an example of it being slightly distorted where the other person wouldn't be able to understand that clear truth, that clear sound, is hitting a short note with it and be like, ging. It would just sound different. So here you are trying to hit the C, like, no, this is what I'm trying to say. But because of the fear, because of the questioning, because of the shame, it comes out with that distorted energy. And so then the other person isn't able to hear that clear C. They're hearing it with that distortion. And oftentimes those distortions, that sharp key is ours, and sometimes it is not. It's our mother's, it's our mother's mother, it's down the line, it's maybe from another lifetime, multidimensional. And so honoring the feelings and the stories and the beliefs around your voice is so important. I think that's what helps us be clearer. And going back to that Sunday afternoon at the table for me, I feel like in my ancestry, having beliefs that were not of Roman Catholic Christian faith, you were a heretic, and oftentimes our lives were at stake. So our beliefs, whether you want to call it pagan, earth-based, whatever it is, that were not of that particular, like in the Inquisition where that was put upon us, your lives were at danger. So oftentimes you did not share that. Like you prayed in private, you did your rituals in private, everything was in private. So the fact that I could come and be at a table where the predominant belief was of this very like religious sect, and say what needed to be said, it felt so powerful for not only me, but my ancestral line of being able to pray in a way that wasn't, Christian Catholic faith.
I love when people show up exactly as they're meant to to give us opportunities like that. Like if your mom and your mother-in-law were not who they are, that would not have been as powerful for you.
Right.
You sit at a table with me and, your other friends, like, we're like, yeah, let's do it the way that we want to do it. And then that's still lovely and
Thank you, great
powerful.
mother. It would have not been a big deal at all.
Yeah, but like, I do feel like there are people in our lives who show up
Yeah.
exactly as they're meant to, because it is a soul invitation for us to step up into our voice and have that hard conversation. And for us to face that fear that, is inside us, or as you're saying, like that sharp note, and just like stare it in the face and say, no, we're not going to entertain you. You're not coming into the conversation today. This is the truth. Because without those opportunities, we don't have the opportunity to embody what we're being invited to embody.
It's so important what you just that's because oftentimes when we're in spaces like that, it can feel incredibly uncomfortable. We sometimes just hold it in and blame the other people. Why is it like this? Why don't they understand me? Why don't like right? And why is this person's belief so different from mine? And you'll keep getting those experiences, and it's such a beautiful invitation to be able to speak the unspeakable, say what needs to be said, because the minute that you do it, you can feel it's almost like an unlocking in a way.
Yeah.
Once you get past the ego chatter of like, oh no, you said the hard thing, and it's like, kick, cook. I don't have the words to describe other than it feels like maybe the noose is a little like looser, where it's like, oh, you can breathe, and things that that sharp key isn't as sharp anymore, or these stories aren't weighing on you as much anymore because it doesn't matter. You realize once you say it, it's like, wow, that doesn't really matter. In the end, it doesn't matter their reaction or what they think about it. What matters is that you said what needed to be said.
It's reminding me of, I think I've spoken about this woman, Florence Scovel Shinn, and she wrote this book in 1905 called The Game of Life and How to Play It. And she writes in this book a lot about essentially speaking your manifestations, but also living it, showing the universe, this is what I'm believing is happening. This is how I'm acting to align with it. I mean, like way before her time. And there's just this really simple thing she talks about, and it's essentially just facing the fear, where there's multiple examples in the book. And this one that's coming to mind is this person was deathly afraid of ladders. And I think he was trying to go to the bank maybe, and there was a ladder on the sidewalk, and so the guy couldn't get to the bank. He could not, so he had to turn around. And she said something essentially like, just face your fear. Just go, and you know where you're needing to go. Don't let that fear deter you. And he said, okay, I'm going to go. And when he went back, like, the ladder was gone. Now, the person could have just moved, but the simple act of choosing to face the fear and choosing to speak the unspeakable or say the hard thing is facing that fear. And then the fear is absolved, goes away. You realize that not only does it not matter, it just didn't even exist because it was a part of a story that was playing, like you said, maybe from lifetimes ago. What I feel I've found is sometimes it isn't even mine, or it's not even necessarily within my fractal or within my generational ancestry, but it's collective. So many of us have taken on, all of us have taken on collective things. And if we're consciously working through these things, then we're stepping out of those edges and releasing those stories and no longer allowing ourselves to be limited by that. And these fears and these stories, it's just part of that. Stepping into and speaking, using our voice, saying the hard things, stepping into the hard conversation, not turning away from things because of fear. All of that is just part of that. that clearing, that healing.
Yeah, absolutely. A few things come up because there's also the antithesis of what we're talking about, which is almost how you can speak with distortion, but I'm going to say it. I don't care. Like, I don't care. I'm just going to say the hard thing. I don't know why I'm doing these
Mm.
kind of, because we see that
It's
play.
from a place of bravado.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm gonna put on this, like, I'm gonna be so strong and
Yeah. I
yeah,
guess it's
that's
very the distorted
false
masculine.
bravado, yeah.
Kinda, because we see that play out a lot in our society where people will say whatever the hell they want and there isn't any disregard to others. That's not that's the opposite side of the coin distortion, right? Because that's not truth. That's cloud. It's like power and control and belittling others to help for others to fall under suit behind me. And so,
It's an overt, how do I wanna say it? It's somebody else using the distortion of their voice to keep other voices down, as the truth of your voice will invite others into the conversation, and it does not project shame or blame. That's a
yeah,
great.
I think so. If you're listening to this and you're wondering, well, I would like to speak the unspeakable, I'd like to say a hard thing. Where do I even begin? Because maybe the hard thing has been festering for a while and I wouldn't even know where to begin. I find the easiest is just to speak through your experience and how you feel about it, what your experience is, what your needs are. Because sometimes we approach a conversation with someone else, and when we speak it, it's all about them. They do this to me. They make me feel this way. They are this. And taking ownership of and responsibility for ourselves can help when we speak it. My experience is this. I am feeling this way, not you are this, you make me, which is such a simple distinction, but I still can forget that sometimes when I'm upset. You kind of go into the blame game thing and then just shit's flying out of my throat and I'm not conscious of what's coming out. It's just this like regurgitation where just definitely kind of in a stress response mode, fight mode.
Yes, that's one thing I learned as well, is keeping it only about your experience and what you're feeling and from your perspective, and not even being, because there are times where I know I've said, and you may feel like this, or but that's okay, and you're trying to be kind and understanding, but you're just projecting and you're just assuming and you're just clouding things. And I mean, really, honestly, I think sometimes the hard thing is going to probably be spoken into a field that needs to be cleared. And that's where the aggression, I have experienced it so many times where I have come in to a conversation doing exactly as you've suggested, and as I've been very grounded in myself, but then I just get shit on, just projected all over because the field is so clouded and so dirty with unspoken things.
Yeah.
So, oftentimes I feel like I'm guided to speak things into a field and to clear it out, there's stagnation, and I may not even really understand what fully is happening or what fully needs to shift, but I can feel the energy in the field, and like I'm just called to say something, but not from a place of, again, you're being awful and you're doing this and I can feel this, but the shadow or the projection, everything that's there is just going to come up because of that, because of the truth of what's spoken into the field, I feel like.
Yeah, it's again, I keep getting the word neutrality. It's neutrality and I try to base it off of observations, right? I've noticed lately or I've observed something I've seen. How do you feel about that? What's your experience been with that? And try to speak to it that way rather than saying, you've been this, you are this, right? Because then that's just your kind of distorted lens that you're speaking to. I had another experience I want to bring in this conversation is, and this ties back to our conversation around AI. A few weeks ago, shortly after that, or shortly before, I think that visual with the women in the noose, I kept like getting these beautiful experiences that were making me really uncomfortable about where I knew I needed to say something. And one of them was one of my children's teachers. I know I needed to say something to the principal about it because my son had been coming home and telling me these kind of really inappropriate things that this teacher was saying in front of the class. And it had been going on for so long. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to say something. And so this wasn't voice, it was through writing, which is still an expression of our voice in a way, writing it. And I had this experience where I wrote it all up and I showed it to my husband because I wanted my husband to be a part of it, to feel like we were doing this together. And his reaction was really interesting because when I went to show it to him, the story that played out in my head was, oh yeah, he'll be supportive of you sending this, right? Like we tell ourselves these stories of how things are going to play out. Well, he was like, oh, I wouldn't write it that way. I wouldn't write it that way at all. I don't know if she's going to take it that way. And he's like, I can write something up for you if you want. I can write something up for you, or you can put it in AI and, see, I feel like you need to be more assertive in this paragraph. And I had to be really clear with him. I'm not looking for you to write it. I need to write it. It needs to come from me. I'm just looking for feedback on certain words, or, if there are certain words you want me to be more assertive, that's fine. But I don't want you to write it for me. I had to be very clear about that. And this was an exercise more so for me. And he got kind of offended by it. He's like, oh, well, why do you ask for my advice? I am, but I'm not asking for you to write it for me. I had to keep saying it over and over again. So essentially, I didn't take his advice. I'm putting that in quotes because that's kind of how he felt. And I used my letter. I sent it to her. And long story short, we had I was invited in. We had a great confidential conversation with the principal. I followed up with my husband about what happened. And he said, huh, well, I guess it was important that it came from you. And so it was this nice, yeah, it was important because it was my invitation. I needed to do it. I needed to use my voice. I could feel what needed to come through, but I had this invitation of are you sure? Because you're looking to be more assertive, rah, rah, are you looking to bring that power in? And so it was really beautiful, the unfolding where he could then see that and say, huh, I could see why that was important for you, that you needed to do it. Yeah.
I had many similar situations like that with my daughter in the school that she was at previous to where she is now with the owner. It was a very small little farm school, private little farm school in our area. And there were many times where I felt called to say something, and my husband was alive at the time, and he would offer. I don't think that, she la 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 la, literally almost the exact same thing. And every time it was like, I've got it. Like, I know I need to be the one that says it, because if I had gone in and if I had gone, another situation just came in that I'll share here in a second, because I had learned that if I went in with his voice and not mine, that things would get cloudy and it would be muddled. And it's because I did that. I had a situation, we were engaged, and I had a situation with a friend. It doesn't really matter what it was, but I was really hurt. She was supposed to be in our wedding, and I was talking with her because there had been a mix up on her end. And I had him in one ear, telling me what to say. And I said it. And part of it was true, but it was not me. It was not through my voice. It was not really the truth. And so things got really muddled and things got really, honestly, out of hand. And because I wasn't being myself. I was trying to be him.
Yep.
And so, there are just times where we know that we need to say something. It's on us because it's coming to us. And if we just need to be careful, like, and conscious, like what we're asking for from our partners or friends if we're going somewhere, wanting clarity, but really the clarity needs to come from within. And if it's something like that where, you're wanting to get your partner's input because it's something with your children, that's one thing. But I do feel like uh, I know for myself, there are so many times where I've gone to friends or my husband or family for input on how to say things when it is a personal thing. And I don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, I don't have a partner right now, like for my children, but like for myself, I really don't look outside of myself for how to phrase things, but I am very conscious and very aware, like in texts and emails, what is clear, like what feels right within myself, not, what would be the right thing in the eyes of society or, trying to please somebody else. Because that's so important that it comes from within the heart, the throat, the womb, the like spirit through us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, if for our listeners, if you may even find that this conversation could be triggering some big feelings around, for me, when I know I need to say something or I need to take divine action towards something, I usually can feel it in my belly. That's why I knew. I was like, oh, it's because your belly is like your will center. And so it'll like, I'll feel oftentimes this kind of light up of this like call to take action. And then there's a part of me that out of fear will like, you almost want to like, no, suffocate it.
Tamp
Like,
it down.
yeah. No, 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 no. We don't want to do that. So then it almost feels like I can feel this kind of twisting in my belly. That's how I have felt it. And so I have learned through the body barometer, if I feel that way, there's something there. And when I'm feeling that way, that's an invitation for me to get curious about it. Feel into thoughts, beliefs, patterns that would have this reaction to this invitation, right? Like anytime I'm feeling big emotions or big like body sensations, I just know that there's more there. So if you're even listening to this, it's like maybe you're starting to feel things in your body, or emotions, or even mental projections are coming up like, well, I would want to say it, but all these things are going to happen. I invite you just to breathe and get curious about it. And and when we can kind of start to separate those distortions and know, oh, well, that's just a fear from my childhood, because I learned I couldn't ever speak up because then I was this or that, or sometimes maybe I got physically punished or things like that. Like, we have to just start to strip away the beliefs and the patterns to get to what needs to be said and what needs to be moved through you. And I feel like all of these stories, they seem like just simple examples, but they're not. They're massive. It's massive work. It's really, really important, especially for the feminine.
I will say, when you talk about the body, I love the body barometer. It's for me, and I think that this is what played out with my thyroid, was when I was 10. So, I mean, I came in with a lot of this because early on, like I started experiencing symptoms of stuff with my jaw and my throat. I had, again, quote unquote, TMJ. Well, first of all, we all have TMJ, fucking joint and it's your jaw. But like, I had jaw issues. And what I started to notice, the correlation with my thyroid, was anytime my jaw hurt, it was because I was literally like clamping my jaw shut to not say what fucking needed to be said. Like, anytime my jaw hurt, which it rarely hurts now because I say what I need to say, but unpacking that, it was massive for me to notice. Every time I spoke, my jaw pain would go away instantly. And so it's like that physical pain is a resistance to where we know we need to go, to what we know we're being called to step into. And when we start to honor and trust that, then we stop causing ourselves pain. We stop making ourselves sick. We take the noose off.
Yep.
And it is within our power to do that. And I also feel like it's important, kind of taking it back to the conversation where people show up exactly as they're meant to. There are times where we have to make the tough decision to just no longer associate with people if they are not in alignment, if they cannot honor our truth, our needs and feelings, and our expression, where we don't just need to continue to hang out with people and be around people because we need to continue this fight and we need to continue to butt up against that. And that's a personal journey within each of us. Because I think for so long, like, I know I associated with people that I had to stay quiet in order to be around. But then again, like, the pain in my jaw, and I couldn't stay small anymore. I couldn't not say how hurtful they were being, or I couldn't not speak up for myself. And then when I did that, the truth was shown. Again, the field was clear, so it was easy to see. Or they left because they didn't like what I had to say. And that's not, again, me coming from that bravado place. It's just the truth. And a lot of people don't like that.
Yeah. And especially we live in a cyclical pattern reality. And so if we had a pattern that played out so many times when we were a child or in another life or ancestral, it'll keep playing out until we choose a different response. So, that's why oftentimes if you had a parent or a caregiver or someone in your life that, stifled your voice, or made you feel like your voice wasn't like important, or anytime you spoke about how you were feeling, your feelings were justified and you were then blamed, that will play out. You'll see that again when you get older, where you have more power and more privilege to be able to change it to be, a different result. Because oftentimes when we are so vulnerable as children, or maybe in other lifetimes or other situations where literally it's not safe to say it, like you can't say it, you're gonna, like, for many different reasons, you can't say the hard thing. Yeah. So it is an invitation then to rewrite that and heal that, and not only heal it for yourself, but heal it for generations before and after. It's really big, massive, important work. And so, if it is safe to do so, it needs to be said.
Yeah.
It is a huge privilege. And with big privilege comes big responsibility.
Yeah.
That's, I feel that oftentimes.
Yeah.
I'm really honored to be able to be in this feminine body and know that for the most part, I am safe to be able to say the unspeakable. What a privilege that is.
Yes. There are a lot of humans that are not living in safe areas.
Absolutely.
And I feel like right now is the time for those of us that are safe to be saying the things that need to be said.
Yeah.
Because it's, while I believe those kinds of acts can absolutely ripple and affect the world right now, from here all the way across the world, I can't help but know that what we're doing right now, the ripples and the effects of it may not be seen for lifetimes.
Hmm. Oh, absolutely.
And so even though we can feel it within ourselves, and I mean, there are times where I look at the things that I've shifted within myself and I look at my children, and I know I've affected them, and like, in a good way. We've cleared things even since they've been here. I know that there's been massive healings for them that's just changed the trajectory of their lives. But also at the same time, there's so much that we're just not going to see in this lifetime. The shifts that we're making, the things that the change that we're affecting.
The impact energetically and quantumly is massive, but on a physical level, it takes much longer to be able to see that impact, I think. Okay, something else I keep getting that wants to come through is when we're speaking, I just want to keep bringing this and just make sure it's you. It's you. It's coming from you because one thing we see or I've observed in this kind of polarized reality is there's a lot of, especially when it comes to politics, there's a lot of sound bites, meaning there's a lot of these like one line headers, like this happened, this is the information. And sometimes we're quick to grab onto that and then make that our voice. Like, oh, I'm going to say it. All right. And that just regurgitates this distortion where that actually isn't truth. That's meant to provoke something that's usually based around fear and not an empowered place, powerlessness. And so I would encourage, you know, us in this conversation that if you are feeling strongly about a particular issue or something like that, put your personal feelings and into it, how you feel, and not, again, not the husband's voice, not the newscaster's voice. It's you, because the results will be very different when it comes from you and not just some regurgitated soundbite that just keeps spiraling around out of control.
I feel like you were getting something similar to what I've been getting, and so I want to spin off of that a little bit, where there are times where we are called to speak. We feel just like you're talking about, maybe with something political or something, we feel really called to speak to something, and that can be really powerful when it comes from us, when we let essentially like our voice box and our vessel be the vessel that the divine is spoken through. But then there are also times where we are called not to speak, where that is just as powerful and just as important, and almost being, the term that's coming is like gracious, where not everything needs to be said, not everything needs to be nitpicked or pointed out, or you don't, like, not all of us are meant to speak on political things, not all of our voices are meant to be added to every thing. And so sometimes not speaking and not saying something is just as powerful and just as important.
I
And
agree.
that's where discernment, and again, not being caught up kind of in the emotions of things, and looking to your own internal guidance and your own like inner masculine of like, is this really where my energy needs to be, where it's best used at this time? Does my voice need to be here, kind of thing? Because there have been many times where it's almost like my ego wanted to say something, but the guidance was like, it doesn't really need to be.
Not necessary. Yeah.
And honoring that was just as powerful and just as important as honoring and stepping into the times where I have been called to speak and say something.
Yeah. Discernment is so key. I'm there with you. I almost see it, it's almost like discernment. You want to go through the layer of discernment before you bring it up, right? It's like a lid or a lid isn't the right word, but a layer. You want to go through the layer of discernment because then it'll be very conscious. You will be making a conscious decision. Every word that comes out of your throat, you will be very conscious about where it's coming from. And that will help it be more clear rather than just,
Yeah.
not any kind of discernment filter, I guess. Filter would be the best.
That's the term that came, but I don't know that it is a filter, but I like the layer of discernment, because that is what, it's almost that pause that you need in order to ensure that you are clear within yourself. And it's the discernment that brings the clarity, where you can still speak with fire and rage at an injustice, for example, but you're not going to bring in your personal emotions that, unbeknownst to you, might actually be from past lives and not really about this situation. that you're experiencing in the moment.
Sure.
So many of us bring in baggage from the past, and that's what we're speaking from. We're not really speaking from the truth. And I think that discernment brings the pause that then allows for the clarity to settle in.
Yeah, good distinction. So speaking with discernment and speaking consciously means you're speaking present moment. You're not regurgitating things from the past, which is can be such a habit. Yeah.
Mm.
Feels like a good place to put maybe I was going to say a period, a pause, because I feel like this might be an ongoing conversation because so much of what you said at the beginning is so much of the creation of the eternal compass was an invitation to speak what needs to come through both of us. And so I would just like to end with a feeling of gratitude for being able to have this space to speak what needs to be spoken through us, and just so much love and gratitude for our listeners. And maybe this sparked something within you, an invitation to speak the unspeakable or say the hard thing. And we just want to honor and recognize that in you. And it is hard work, but it's very, very important. And just breathing into that heart space and know that whatever you're experiencing and feeling in this moment is just so. And we are right here walking this journey with you.